marine biologists don't really make a ton of money generally. Ocean engineering had more earning potential, but
Got it.
also just growing up, math was easy for me and I enjoyed it. This has all really come from exactly what I wanted to do when I was a kid. So when I was in fourth grade, I had to write, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up paper? And I said either a marine biologist or some sort of structural engineer.
Today, I will be interviewing Hannah Huezo, who is a project engineer. Hannah, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Lexi. I'm super excited. This
Of
job
course, I
dictionary is
can't
going
wait
to be
for
great.
I can't wait for our discussion today. So, we're actually going to go ahead and pop right into the questions. With our first question, we kind of like to combine them into three. So, in your own words, what do you do? Where do you live? And as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I live in Jacksonville, Florida. So I grew up in Texas, but I live in Florida now. I live in Florida because I work for Manson Construction Company as a project engineer. And really what that means is that I'm in the construction management industry, but on the marine side. So I do dredging, which is making ship channels deeper, rebuilding beaches, rebuilding marshes, and marine construction, like building ports and ferry terminals and that kind of thing. So as a project engineer for that, I'm over all of sort of the scheduling, the engineers making the work plans, and making sure everything gets coordinated on the project. So below my project manager, but over the other field engineers. And this has all really come from exactly what I wanted to do when I was a kid. So when I was in fourth grade, I had to write, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up paper? And I said either a marine biologist or some sort of structural engineer. And then
Wow.
yeah, my dad's a mechanical engineer, and then I loved the ocean. So my mom would show me documentaries about like Jacques Cousteau and stuff, that whole classic type of thing. And then when I was a junior in high school, my dad came home one day and he said, Hannah, I know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I thought it was kind of like a dad joke that was coming. And so I was kind of like, what, dad? He goes, I met an ocean engineer today. And that was it. Like, he didn't need to say anything else. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to be and do for the rest of my life. So I went to Texas A&M. I got my ocean engineering degree. There aren't a ton of schools that in the U.S. that have ocean engineering for undergrad. So Texas A&M is one of them. Went there, and all of that has led to now working in an industry that I love.
Wow, that story just like gave me goosebumps everywhere. That's so crazy how your dad just knew. He was like, this is what she's
Mm-hmm.
gonna do. And it came to
Yeah.
be. That
Oh, and
is
my
so
mom like
awesome.
came out of the kitchen when she heard him say that, and she's like, what did you say? Like, everyone knew. Everyone knew.
Wow, that is so cool. And how long have
Yeah.
you been working in this field?
So I did my first internship after my sophomore year of college for Manson, the company I work for now, in
Mhm.
2013. So I was 20 years old. I couldn't actually rent a car or get my own hotel room, which was a little difficult because this is a
Right.
100%, especially when you start, it's a 100% travel job. So it was like there was a point where one of my flights got canceled and I had to get my parents to get my hotel room because our travel agent was not on,
And you
it
were
was
so
too late.
young.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for full time for 8.5 years. But my first step into this field was in 2013, right after my sophomore year of college.
Wow, well, congratulations. That's wonderful. And I know you kind of mentioned, that your parents kind of encouraged you to go into this field, but what exactly was it about being an ocean engineer, kind of mending those two together that kind of made you want to get into it in the first place?
hmm well, marine biologists don't really make a ton of money generally. So ocean engineering had more earning potential. But
Got it.
also just growing up, math was easy for me and I enjoyed it. That kind of ended when I got to Cal 3 and differential equations.
Uh-huh.
I
Stop
love
right there.
calculus, but once you get past Cal 2, I don't necessarily enjoy it. But you know, it was just kind of my passions all coming together, um, that I could, you know, work with the construction of uh, infrastructure and just really cool things like a port. That, like, to me, that's the coolest thing that you could build is a
Mhm.
port, or to dig a ship channel. That is the coolest thing that you could do. Um, so once I found a company that did that, I kind of didn't know that it really existed until I was 18 at a career fair at A&M, and I ran into a recruiter for the company I work for now. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and I never really wanted to be a design engineer. My dad stayed in design for as long as he could. He was a mechanical engineer.
Hmm.
And that sounded like a nightmare to me, just working in CAD and doing that. But that didn't mean that I didn't want to be in the engineering field. That just meant that I didn't want to be sitting at a desk. I wanted to be outside. And what better place to be outside than on the water? So
Exactly.
here we are.
Exactly. Wow, how cool, how neat. And you mentioned that you went to Texas A&M and M, and that's where
Mhm.
you studied and they connected you to that internship. Are there any like certain degrees or certifications that one is required to get a job like yours?
Typically, it's going to be someone with an engineering degree or a construction management degree. If you're looking at sort of just the average, or the expected, and even the desired. But that's not to say that that's everyone that we hire, even for my position. When I started full time, one of the other women I was hired with, she had a biology degree and had gone to a survey school in Wilmington, North Carolina, and learned hydrographic surveying for 2 years,
Mhm.
and was able to get the same job that I got. So, and she did very well for herself. Um, but yeah, starting in that construction or engineering baseline is going to be your best bet. And like, if you start there, you're probably going to enjoy the work.
Right.
But like I said, that's not the only way to get there. There are also so many construction management certificates out there, um, and ways to get like your general contractor's license, that could bring you into this job, like specifically the job that I have, without having an engineering degree or a construction management degree. Exactly.
Got it. So you do mention that there's kind of like different backgrounds coming into this industry in this field in general. Are there
Mm-hmm.
any different types of names or titles referred to, like you, for example, you're a project engineer. Does your title ever go by something else, or is it usually just referred to as a project engineer?
Yeah, so in construction, there's generally a progression, that's pretty typical for the industry. You're a field engineer, and then project engineer and project manager, and some side steps might be quality control manager, or like a scheduling engineer. But
Mhm.
yeah, the that progression, field engineer to project engineer to project manager, is pretty typical, not just for marine construction, but any type. Um, and you know, that's the goal is sort of project manager, but there are certainly two sides to get to that project manager position. There's that field engineer, project manager, but there's also going up what we refer to as the craft side, um, or the crew side of working up to foreman and then superintendent and then project manager. And even some engineers end up really liking the the superintendent role more than the managing the engineering, managing the work plans, the schedule. They enjoy more managing the crew, making sure we have all of the tools and materials that we need, um, being more fully devoted to how we're actually going to perform the construction work. And so they go into the superintendent role after maybe getting to project engineer or starting as a field engineer. So yeah, so as far as the title, pretty common, but there are several directions to get there and several directions you can go afterwards that all kind of intermix.
Got it. So kind of like depending on where you are on the ladder, your title can vary, and then moving up or, different positions carry different titles,
Yeah, yeah,
is what I'm kind of getting from all of that.
exactly. Yeah, and all of it can kind of fall
So
into construction management.
got it. Okay, so kind
Yeah.
of like all into one. Got it. Right. So now walk us kind of like through a day in your life as a project engineer. So clock in time, clock out. I mean, I'm sure your days look different on the daily, but if you could kind of like give us just a summary of what your day looks like when you go into work.
Yeah, I think I'll probably give you like two or three variations. I've had a varied career. So I worked for 3.5 years in the dredging side of our company, and then about 3.5 years in our construction side of the company, and 2 years in our contract. And now I'm back into the construction side. So and this is sort of how I describe it when I'm recruiting students, is when you go into dredging as a field engineer, and the progression is the same. Your day is really dependent on weather. So if you can't go out, like if the seas are too high for you to go out and perform your hydrographic survey, well, then your day is like 2 hours. You just have to do your daily reports. And then if the dredge needs anything from you, you're on call. But yeah, that's kind of it. But I've certainly had plenty of those days where the weather just doesn't allow for any more work than doing daily reports. However, I've also had 18-hour days because, again, when it's weather dependent, and you have a really good weather window and you need to go lay some pipe, you have to lay the pipe that day. And once you get out there, you can't stop until it's laid. So that's, on the boat at 6 a.m. And on the boat until the work is done. Those are less common than the we can't go out days, but that's sort of what a dredging day will look like. You're doing daily reports and you're surveying either on the beach that you're building or in the marsh or on the island that you're restoring. So land surveying, or you're on a boat doing hydrographic surveying or helping what we call the bull gang lay dredge pipe. Also, that job is 100% travel. And so every dredging company has a rotation schedule. Manson's the company that I work for. We do 19 days on and 9 days off. So you fly to your project, you work every day for 19 days, and then you get 9 days off. So you essentially get a spring break every month. If you get your weekends, you go home on a Friday, you get 2 weekends to 5 days in between, and then you fly back on a Monday. So it's for the sprinter, not necessarily the long distance runner. Yeah. So that's the dredging life. The construction life, you're going to be in one place for longer term. So like a port construction project takes 2-3 years. So you're going to be on site, usually the same hours as the crew. You might knock off a little earlier, get there a little bit late because they'll be hourly and you won't be. But that's going to be like 6 a.m. to 4, 7 to 5. And you'll be on site, checking to make sure that the work is being done in accordance with the contract. Really, what I say a lot of my job is, hey, we got this thing. I need you to go put it over there. Hey, did you put it in the right place? Okay, I'm going to go check that you put it in the right place. Okay, hey, client, we put it in the right place. So that's a lot of what it is. Just putting your eyes on the rebar that was installed, watching the concrete get poured, and then reporting it. And part of that, of course, is all the coordination that goes into that. So on a concrete pour day, I need the concrete to show up. I need the pump truck to actually get the concrete from the truck to the place it needs to
Mm-hmm.
be. I need the testers. And so it's all that coordination as well. Um, so like your technical skills from being that engineering degree or that construction management degree is more for your ability to read the plans and specifications and understand them appropriately. You're not doing a ton of design. You'll do a little bit uh, in preparation of doing the work, but it's more just being able to understand the plans and specifications, making sure that the work is being done in accordance with them, and then reporting that. So it's a lot of just maybe an hour in the office and then go outside for 2 hours, hour in the office. That's sort of the day for being on site. Yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of working with different, teams as well. I mean, I know
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned kind of having like the administrative side, and then you said something earlier that kind of caught my attention about the weather.
Mm-hmm.
Who kind of lets you know, who gives you like the green light, like, yes, let's do it today, or no, let's hold off? Is that you yourself, or do you have like a team, like a weather specialist team kind of giving you the go?
Yeah, our weather specialists are our boat captains. They know.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So
Got
yeah, I'm currently now in a position where I would give a go or a no go, but that's really one that's from now being a decade into it.
Right.
Um, but that's mostly going to be relying on those boat captains who know their vessel and know what it can handle, and they've done this for 10, 20, 40 years. Most people don't have any hydrographic surveying experience uh, coming out of any educational plan that they did. That friend who went to the 2-year program in North Carolina was very unique. You might have some land surveying experience, but for hydrographic surveying, you are using GPS, and the antennas are on the boat, and you're using a program usually called HiPAC, and using a sonar system to measure the depth where you're dredging. So that's a big part of our job. That's probably the first thing that you learn how to do is hydrographic
Mhm.
survey. But of course, land surveying principles translate over to that. Yeah, and then honestly, construction hasn't changed a whole lot over the centuries. It's like, well, I need to pick this heavy thing up, so I'm just going to use advanced pulleys to pick this
Yeah.
heavy thing up. um, so, I mean, honestly, the technology on what we do is pretty basic: Excel, AutoCAD, and then learning that hydrographic survey program. But that's not too difficult. And then your enterprise resource management system, whatever your company is using, that's another thing that you'll learn. But yeah, pretty straightforward accounting stuff, drawing stuff, tracking stuff. Nothing too fancy.
Pretty simple, down
Yeah,
to the line, down to the basics of that.
yeah. And
And
a lot of the stuff that we the end products that are expected out of me or expected out of the engineers that I'm placed over are like 1 or 2 page things. Like, can you condense this information to hand the foreman the smallest package possible, but still get the plan across? Um, so yeah, we like to cut it down and make it as simple as possible.
yeah, I'm sure so that one part of your job can at least be a little bit simple,
Yeah.
a little bit more, not as critical thinking, which I'm sure there's so much of in what you do. So kind of tell us a little bit about what parts of your job are the most exciting to you?
um, it's just being on the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the content of the work that uh, is the most thrilling part for me.
Mhm.
Like I said earlier, I'm building what I think is the coolest thing that anyone can build. So, or I'm,
Yeah.
participating in that. being by the water, but also just the fast paced parts of the job.
Mhm.
You can plan all you want, but we've already brought up weather. You have to adjust. So
Yeah.
you can have the best plan, and you can still end up having a hectic day, which is kind of, it's not what you want, but some of that can be the most fun. So, uh, for the people who kind of thrive on that, they usually do well in this industry, and you get hooked on that. Um, wow, that was a crazy day, and I'm really glad to be home, but that was kind of fun.
Yeah, you get hooked onto that
Yeah,
thrill, and I'm sure the adrenaline is crazy, and it's just, like,
yeah,
rushing through your body, and you're like, "Okay, when am I gonna do this again? Let's do
yeah,
this again tomorrow, if the weather
yeah.
permits."
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of the same as any project management job of having
Mhm.
to make those adjustments and hold in your mind all of those moving pieces in the schedule and the cost and all of that. And you can find that in a lot of contexts, and it's really the context of my job that makes me the happiest and why I stick
Aw,
around.
I love that. And then what parts of your job are a little bit, more on the challenging side, kind of either emotionally draining or challenging, or even sometimes boring things that you don't necessarily
Hmm.
enjoy doing? What are those?
Yeah. Certainly the most challenging is the traveling or the moving, for dredging, which, uh, I started it for over 3 years. Um,
Mhm.
I had a home base in Dallas. We can have, for that position, you can live anywhere in the continental 48 states and then travel to your job. So, um, yeah, I had a home base, but I was only there 9 days out of the month. And so I would
Yeah.
leave and go do my job and come back. And um, in the stage of life that I was in when I was doing that, that was great for me.
Mhm.
I didn't have a ton of issues with that. But as you get older, as you want to get more settled, that gets harder and harder. And the travel never totally goes away in this work. Um, you're not going to be able to constantly have projects in one city. Um,
Mm.
that's kind of not true because we've been working on the port of San Diego for about 20 years, but generally speaking, like you'll have to see different projects in different places, and that's what gets to everyone, even the people who stay a long time. It gets to you, and you have to make that evaluation on when it's worth it and when it's not.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you bring that point up of the travel because I'm sure that a lot of people go into this without even really thinking of that. Like, oh, that's not just outside my backyard where I can go and, do
Hmm.
any of that stuff. So I'm really glad that you do bring that up because I'm sure that can make or break the decision to
Hmm.
go into this industry or not.
Yeah,
Um,
there are two things that we bring up when we're recruiting, and this was how the recruiter talked to me about it. She was telling me about the job. She was like, "Yeah, you're gonna be dredging and be building beaches," and I was like, "Wow, I
mhm.
can't believe that this is a job." And she kept saying,
Yeah.
"No, it's 100% travel. It's 100% travel." And in my head, I was like, "Why does she keep saying that? Like it's a bad thing." Silly
She's
18-year
like,
old Hannah.
no, Hannah,
No, like
it's
you're
a
like you
hundred
need to
percent.
understand. You need to understand this. So that's a consistent way that we've recruited, is saying this is 100% travel. Do not be
Mhm.
disillusioned, because if we're not upfront about that, we're not going to get the people who actually want to do this. And like also you'd end up feeling a little shady if you're like, yeah, come do this great job. Oh yeah, by the way. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So
make sure
speaking of
people know.
travel and kind of like work setting and exactly where you're doing your actual work, are you
Hmm.
able to leave any work at the office or do you take some home? Tell us a little bit more about the work setting of a project engineer.
Yeah. I generally don't have any problem walking away from my work at the end of the
Mhm,
day. Like you do put in some longer hours while you're on, like
mhm.
you're probably doing a 10-hour day, um, sometimes longer, just so you can see what's actually happening. But unless I just have an epiphany in the driving down the road or something, no. Um, once I leave, I leave. Uh, yeah, and I mean, I think that's from person to person. That's a boundary that I have. So I still,
Hmm.
um, even when I was traveling and doing those 19 days on and 9 days off, I, I typically go to church on Sunday morning, but I couldn't go on Sundays because you work every day for 19 days. But I would find a church
Right.
where I could go Sunday nights or Wednesday evenings, just
Wednesdays.
something to be filled again. And when we're out on a project, particularly with dredging, you might be sharing a car with the other engineers. So you might have like 2 cars to 3 engineers. And my colleagues are always really great about like, yeah, you take the car Wednesday or take one of the cars Wednesday night. We totally understand that this is
Hmm.
part of your life and you need that. Um, and then like when I was working on my last long-term construction project in Southeast Texas, I was also on the board of directors for our Night to Shine event at my church. And so that was a big volunteer position, and I did my job. I was very involved in that project. Um, but I still had another life outside of it. So I think there's very much space for you to have your life um, as long as you take it. Yeah.
Yeah, balance is key, kind of like you said, setting up that boundary and, saying, okay, I've worked for 19 days straight. These are going to be 9 days off and
Off,
off, off.
off.
Not gonna, have anything to do with work and taking, care of yourself because you cannot pour, as an empty cup to fill another one's
Mm-hmm.
cup. So I'm really happy that you're able to kind of set that boundary for yourself and stick
Yeah.
to it. Now, as a project engineer, are you able to work flexible hours in a remote setting, or is it typically in office, on site, set hours?
It's not going to be remote. Um, you'll kind of have your time on and your time off.
Mhm.
Um, and your time on is going to be on site. Or if you're not on site for the project yet, like right now, I'm not on a project. We're ramping up to start one. So, yeah, set hours in the office. Um, if I really need to, we're set up for remote work.
Mhm.
Like if I have somebody coming by the apartment to work on my AC and I'm like, can I work from home for the first half of the day or for today? Like that's not an issue. Better than taking it all the way off. But no,
Exactly.
we're very much we're going to be in the office or on site together, um, doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah, more face-to-face interaction. And
Mm-hmm.
then also kind of your specific type of work does require you to be more hands-on and more physical
Yeah.
labor as well.
Yeah.
Are there any busy seasons in this job? So do you ever find yourself at a certain time of year picking up a little bit more, slowing down a little bit more, or is it pretty constant throughout the whole year?
Yeah, it's not really dependent on a season. It's just going to be dependent on what type of project you're working in and what
Mhm.
stage you're working at. Like uh, for example, right now I'm working on a design build project. So my company Manson is partnered up with a design firm, and we are working through the design for a project that Manson will build. But Manson doesn't do design work, so we're like, hey, designers, we're just watching, giving input, managing. So it's a very consistent. I go into the office, I do my work, I go home, go into the office, do my work, go home. And then once it's time to get on site, the first part of a project is super busy. The first third, and then the last fifth of a project is also super busy with all of the closeout. So um, not an annual busy season, but phases of a project are busier.
Yeah, kind of just like case by case basis, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that certain projects also take a little bit more mental effort or physical effort than others. So I'm sure, like you said, kind of just depending on what exactly you're doing, that'll look
Yeah,
different for everyone.
yeah, and you kind of have to. So like right now, I'm not working a rotation schedule. I'm just working 5 days a week, and so I just took a really phenomenal vacation to New Zealand and Australia. And it was wonderful and lovely and so fun, but it was timed in this this season right now because we're not on site for the project. We don't have a ton of responsibility to the project in the sense of like actually turning out deliverables. It's more just sort of working with
Mhm.
our partners and keeping everything coordinated. So yeah, that's sort of how it can affect the timing of your life. Like I couldn't have taken this 3-week vacation at the startup of a project like that. That would have been irresponsible. Um,
Got it.
but I can do it now, and it worked out, and we're all good. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
that's
kind of how
awesome.
that affects life.
And kind of your scheduling and moving
Hmm.
certain things around. Did you enjoy your time in Australia and New
Oh
Zealand? That
my
sounds so
goodness,
fun.
yes.
That sounds
I
awesome.
So I went on a couple of scuba diving trips, and I've been scuba certified for 12 years. I did it for a submarine team competition in college, but I've never
Mhm.
actually gone diving in the ocean.
Wow.
So I've set the bar a little too high with diving in New Zealand and
One
Australia.
extreme
Well,
to the next.
yeah, diving in research tanks to diving in marine reserves in New Zealand.
Oh
Well,
my goodness.
yeah, so it was
But
a good
hey, I'm sure it was an
trip.
experience. And hey, you're doing it for work.
Yes,
You're learning.
it's
It's good
all just
to help your work.
it's continuing education, continuing education.
Exactly. It's just to better you. You were just
Yeah.
bettering everyone around you as well as yourself. Well, that's awesome. I'm
Yes.
really glad you were able to kind of, take that time to go explore and kind of like how you said, work it around your project as well.
Hmm.
What do you think that people underestimate about your profession?
Yeah, I think people underestimate how big of an impact kind of just the maritime industry in general has on our day-to-day lives. Um, like if we didn't dig the mouth of the Mississippi River, our international trade and our national defense would be shut down. Um, I've been sent on like with or our dredges have been sent down to the mouth of the Mississippi for emergency work on projects that I've worked on. I worked on like a 2.5-week project in Maine where it was an emergency job. We had to send one of our dredges up there, sail it up there, and uh, dig some parts of the channel so that a Navy vessel could leave port. Um, so yeah, I think that um, the breadth of the industry and the needs of the industry are underestimated. I don't know if people necessarily underestimate what my job would do, like project engineer,
Mhm.
or just if you like in layman's terms, just a construction manager. It's like, okay, you're on site, you're coordinating people, and you're making sure that the thing gets built. Um, but where there's a gap in I think the general public's understanding, and this would include me before I got into it, the shipping and trade and defense and dredging and everything that goes into our waterways and how we use them as a nation uh, it takes a lot of manpower and it affects everyone's life. I think we all maybe globally felt it in a conscious way whenever the Ever Given ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. Um, like that affected everyone's life. We were already uh, behind from COVID on shipping times and all of that, and then there's
Yeah.
this ship in one of the important waterways of the world, and it's interrupting trade even further. So yeah, I think that's where there's an underestimation, and that's where I try to get people to think about the maritime industry for their career, regardless of if it's like what I do, or if they're an
Mhm.
accountant, or if they're in HR, or if they're um, in any sort of position. Like we even have medics on our vessels. So um, you can do anything that you're already doing, you can do in the maritime industry. And that's what I really love to put out there for people to see. This is my job, but this industry is huge.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that because I feel like the general public, like myself, I don't have any background on an industry like this. I'm just able to learn so much, kind of like what you were saying. You don't necessarily have to be in construction or want to be project engineer to be involved. There's kind of
Hmm.
like different little jobs you can take over. So maybe someone has a really big interest, in the ocean or just the water, but they don't exactly know what they want to do. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're able to kind of mention that just to let them know what's out there.
Hmm.
Now, what do you think that people overestimate about this profession? So anything that's kind of like an overhyped idea, either negative or positive, what's something that you typically hear that you're like, that's not necessarily what's going on here?
I was trying to think through this, um,
Mhm.
and I don't know if I can. I haven't had like a clear answer, except maybe people think that there's a lot more discrimination than there is in the modern industry. Um,
Mhm.
like I think you're gonna find people that you don't get along with or that take issue with you wherever you go. But I think people are um, more afraid for like my safety or something than I've ever felt on site. Um, again, the, this world has issues. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but
Right.
that was honestly such a good thing to find, especially as an intern, where I could kind of try out this industry and this job before I went for it. Like, yeah, I do work with people I would never otherwise interact with, I think. And I think it's made me a better person.
Mhm.
But I think that's maybe, yeah, overestimated. Um, it's not a bad industry to be in as a woman or anything like that. Um,
Yeah.
and just being a woman in the industry is growing, um, and it's just more and more common to see. So I think that's exciting. But usually people think that this is going to be a really hard job or just incredibly taxing and challenging. I think it's because it has engineer in the title. Um,
Mm,
but I don't think it's that, I don't think it's any more taxing than other people's jobs who are,
yeah.
in management or, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for kind of like that perspective because I know like me when I heard like project engineer, ocean engineer, I'm like that sounds it's horrifying for me. Not only because it has the word engineer, but just the ocean. I think you have to be very, made for that. I think you were called for
Hmm.
that and made that was your purpose.
Yeah.
I do have a question that kind of it's not necessarily an assumption, but it's kind of more of a fun question. Do you ever come in contact with like sea life, like on your, on your job? What is that like? Does that ever happen?
Hopefully not. The goal is to never come in contact with the sea creatures.
Okay,
Um,
just I had to. I had to
that
ask.
that being said, we do. So there are regulations around working in waters with manatees. If you see a
Mm,
manatee, you have to shut down. Um, we have in every Army Corps dredging project, and the Army Corps of Engineers manages our waterways. So almost every dredging project at least has an Army Corps permit involved, but often it's the Army Corps running the project or is the owner or the client for the project. Um, and in every one of those, you have to monitor for turtles. You have to protect against taking turtles. And if you take more than two, you're off the project. So,
oh
we don't want to
wow.
take any, but at some point you have to say, okay, what's the cost of one sea turtle for, again, international trade and national defense shutting down? We have to keep going. But um, yeah, so those limits are more to make sure that you're keeping the drag heads on the ground. Those are the vacuums that suck up the sand when you're dredging.
Okay.
We have these little turtle deflectors. So yeah, we have, and there you have to watch out for sturgeon. You can't take sturgeon. One time, this was odd. We were pile driving, so that's where we were taking 54-inch steel pipes and vibrating them into the ground. And it was alligator mating season.
Oh my gosh.
And apparently, it's very common in waters with alligators when you're pile driving that they will come check it out
Oh,
because like the mating call or something is like the females will just vibrate. And so when you're vibrating these steel piles into the ground, it's like the biggest female alligator ever. It's like these male alligators. Well, yeah, these like
wow.
giant male alligators are coming swimming up. So
Oh
they're
my.
fine. They're fine. But yeah,
That is so cool. That's crazy how that works. Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
And then I
Wow.
mean, there's like kind of the fun side of it where um, there aren't many, especially like my last project, there weren't many weeks that I went without seeing a dolphin in the river. So that's not
Oh,
bad.
how sweet. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of what I was thinking about whenever you were mentioning like kind of what you do. I was like, I wonder if she's ever, seen a dolphin or an alligator. I mean, you're in Florida, so I'm sure that that's,
Yeah.
not very uncommon for y'all.
Yeah. Let me
But
see if there's one out in the backyard right now.
yeah, you're like, I actually have one as a pet. She's chilling
Yeah.
in the cage. Oh, cool. So that was a little bit of an assumption that I wanted you to clear up. So thanks
Mhm.
for doing that.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next question. What other fields do you typically see people coming from before going into either project engineering or, working with the ocean as an engineer? Or is it random or do you ever kind of see themes?
It's typically people either with engineering backgrounds or with construction backgrounds already. So um, it's pretty common to see people switch from a land-based uh,
Mm,
construction job to then a marine-based construction job.
okay.
Um, but yeah, that's usually because you know that's who wants to do the work anyway. So um, that's yeah, that's what we get. But like I've also worked with a woman who had a geology degree, and that's somewhat related. Um,
Okay.
but she ended up kind of coming into just from her understanding of soils and whatnot. She then made the transition into dredging, which is moving soils. Um, and she had sort of the science and math background to and the technical background to easily understand the surveying and that sort of thing because surveying is just geometry. So
Okay.
yeah.
So kind of having like just, a little bit of that background knowledge, not necessarily being in construction, but kind of understanding, the ins and outs of all of that. What
Mm-hmm.
about if somebody has a more non-traditional background and they're kind of looking into maybe wanting to start, looking into ocean engineering or project engineering like yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the fastest way to get into the industry or the most effective way?
I think the most effective way or the fastest way is probably going to be jump in land based. So uh, I have a friend who she was a nurse for a long time, and then she ended
Okay.
up buying a pool, um, like pool maintenance and installation company, and she now has her
Okay.
general contractor's license and all of that. So that really, she's not like in my industry, but that's an example of someone who was a nurse and then ended up getting her general contractor's license because this pool company does a lot of like installations and repairs to pools. Um, and I only say to like if you're coming from a switch that's that big from nursing to construction, something
Mhm.
that is that stark of a contrast, it would just be easier to access land-based stuff or like find something local because like I said, you're going to be traveling when it's marine related just because there are fewer places where you're going to have big ports. Um, so yeah, I think that's the easiest way to start, and that would only be if you can't immediately get in um, working as a field engineer for a maritime type company. Or let's see, I talked to a student once who had worked as a longshoreman at the Port of Houston. And
Okay.
so a longshoreman kind of, they do the labor at the port, like they'll drive the forklift to move stuff. So
Mhm.
that was very enticing to us. We're like, okay, you already understand what it's like to be around vessels and um, throwing lines and tying up ships and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
you could work around, like people have worked around yachts and then worked slowly on their degree and then kind of gotten into this. So you can, I would say you can either come from working with boats in another capacity and then move into the construction, or you can start with working in any sort of construction, and there's just more opportunity in the land side, and then moving into the maritime side.
Kind of like working your way through different parts to kind of get to the ultimate goal, like a little, a little map.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think that somebody has to be really good at or just generally enjoy doing to be successful in a role like yours?
Most people that we that end up thriving in our industry, one, enjoy being outside.
Mhm.
That is a big draw for a lot of people who are just um, who consider like sitting at a desk being a prison sentence. So if you're wanting to be truly outside, that is a big thing. Um, and then people who can adjust because adjust quickly because I mean, again, just to go back to the simple example of weather can determine
Yeah.
what you do in a day. So really rigid, if you have a really rigid schedule, not for you. you you will not get to have a really rigid schedule. Ooh. Except on maybe a 28-day cycle. You can, like, I had a good 28-day cycle schedule. Um,
Wow, that's the only constant that you'll get.
yeah, yeah. So people who can handle or enjoy bouncing around, like I enjoy the bouncing around part and getting to, oh,
Mhm.
I'm going to drive up to Charleston. Oh, I'm going to go out to Southern California for a week and I have to see this project. Or, um, yeah, so it's um, if you are, if you can handle being flexible, and particularly if you enjoy sort of that flying by the seat of your pants thing, you'll do just fine. And if you like being outside, and really, like the rest is kind of just being an adult or working in any sort of business. It's like, do I have the right things? How much am I paying for them?
Yeah.
Just general business management type stuff. There's another guy I worked with. He's a business major, and he worked in our offshore group for a while as a barge administrator. So that's sort of keeping the log for the barge, handling some communications while they're offshore, that kind of thing. And then he got assigned to one of my projects, and he didn't have a ton of background with AutoCAD, but he figured it out. And he was able to do well just with his administration background and his time out on a barge. So I think there are ways to find your how your skill set works. But if you don't like being outside, if you're not willing to make those last minute changes,
Yeah,
not
lots
going
of
to be a fun time for you.
multitasking. No, it's not. And then especially inside the water, and if you're not a water person, I'm sure that's not gonna work out
Oh
either.
yeah,
So,
that's the other thing that we have to stress when we're recruiting is, one, this is 100% travel for the dredging side, and
uh-huh.
two, do you get seasick? Because if you get seasick, this is not for you. Like,
Yeah, we're not gonna bring you on.
no,
Or
like
if you
this is
have
not good for either side. We don't want you to be sick.
exactly.
For,
No one's gonna be happy, nothing's gonna get done. I'm sure also, like, water phobias, I know, like, my mom has the biggest water phobia on this earth, so
oh,
I'm sure this sounds like an absolute nightmare for her.
oh yes, no, that would be terrible. Yeah,
Yeah.
walk right by. There's another
Yes,
place for you.
exactly.
Yeah,
She'll thrive somewhere else.
yes,
And,
exactly.
how long do you think that it usually takes for someone to kind of get used to that life of constant moving, constant travel, being in the ocean, being outside, or how long does it take for somebody to get good at it?
um, I think I think it maybe wear like the travel and stuff maybe wears on you maybe more than getting good at it. Um,
Okay.
but getting good at the job. So
Mhm.
I mentioned I had a really varied career. So instead of starting in dredging and then becoming a project engineer through dredging, I was a field engineer in dredging, and then I was a field engineer in construction, and then I was an interim contract specialist effectively.
Mhm.
Uh, and then from all of that varied experience became project engineer after about 8.5 years, or about 8 years. But if you were to stay, like if you were to start in dredging and just work your way through dredging, it would be like 5 years, um, to get really good at your job, out in the field, to then become a project engineer. Similar with construction, it might be 5, 6 years. Kind of
Yeah.
depends on if you're a specialist or how you go about your career.
So exactly what you're doing. And you did mention that you kind of like jumped around a little bit and you have
Mm-hmm.
experience in different paths of this. What is the typical promotion path like? Is that something that exists within project engineering, kind of like from entry level to highest position? What's the average time that people kind of spend at each level?
Mm-hmm. You would start as a field engineer, uh, and from there, like I said, like if you decide to be a specialist in cutter suction dredges, which is just one type of dredging, um, you might become a dredging project engineer in 3 years. But
Okay.
if you do more, what I've done, like I said, it took me 8 years. But then once you get to project engineer, um, it may the length of time before you would then go to project manager, um, would probably vary. So I may be looking at a shorter time at the position at the level of project engineer than a specialist, because I have seen everything. Um,
Mm.
and so a specialist might get to project engineer faster, but might stay there longer before becoming a project manager, just because you need to see the other type of work that we do. Um,
Yeah.
and that's pretty common, across the industry. Like it could take you 3 years, it could take you 10 years, just kind of depending. And then, um, that all does kind of lead to the next step, like how long does it take you to get to PM, and then what do you do after project manager, or do you just want to be a project manager, or do you want to make that move over to being superintendent, who is, like I said, more over the craft. The guys actually turning the wrenches, whereas I'm more looking at the planning and the schedule and the money, side of things. Yeah.
Got it. So kind of depending on exactly what you want to do, you can go into kind of like different levels from there.
Mm-hmm.
And the specialist you said was the one that kind of needs to stay a little bit longer to go ahead and see a little bit more? Was it that, the
Yeah,
project
yeah.
specialist?
Like a specialist, someone who, is just very good at doing, uh, there's like clamshell dredging, hopper dredging, cutter suction dredging. And if you get really good at working on a cutter suction dredge, you might get to project engineer very quickly. And then you might stay at the project engineer level for longer than a peer might. Like your peers will then catch up to you, and then you would get promoted, you know,
Got it.
later
Okay.
on. Yeah,
Yeah,
if that makes
interesting.
sense.
So, what is the average salary of somebody at your level? So, I'm sure that it can vary from different states,
Mm-hmm.
different positions, different companies, but if you can provide just kind of like a range, even if it's broad.
Yeah. At a project engineer level, you're at that point expecting a 6 figure salary of 6,000.
I was like,
Six.
that's not
I
right.
don't think that you can live on that. A 6 figure salary, is reasonable uh, across a lot, especially the maritime industry. Um, Once you get to that level, expecting a 6 figure salary is common. And even before that, it's common to make 6 figures, but it's not from your salary. When you're traveling, you get stipends. So you
Okay.
get, like for dredging, our hotel or our accommodations and our vehicles and our gas and everything was covered, by the company, and then we would get,
Mhm.
like a food stipend. And then for construction, because I had to relocate, I got a housing stipend and a food stipend. And so, at the end of the year, I had 6 figures, but that wasn't my salary. So that's kind of how that shakes out also.
Yeah.
Um,
It
and
doesn't
again,
always come in the form of like actual, money,
mhm,
money. You can get in different ways.
yeah, yeah. Or uh, just looking at your salary isn't necessarily, well, probably don't have to tell you that's about your compensation, right?
Yeah.
And so, uh, yeah, but in just looking at salary at the around the project engineer level is when it's pretty common to see a 6 figure for people.
And
Yeah.
so, whenever people in your field move on, what kind of work do they typically go into next? Again, is it random? Do you ever see themes? Do people even move on, or do they usually just, retire their career and kind of stop at project engineer, or is there something that they go into after?
Mm-hmm. Um, there are kind of 3 places that people go to leave the um, kind of leave the industry, or at least leave our sector, like the construction side of this industry. People can either go to work in design firms, which offers a much more stable life. That's uh, it's pretty common knowledge. Not breaking
Mhm.
news, and not sinking any companies by saying working in a design firm is going to be a more stable life than working in construction. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And then another place people go are to government agencies or regulatory agencies. So I mentioned earlier that a lot of our, or all of our dredging projects involve the Army Corps of Engineers. So a lot of people who have worked for dredging or even marine construction companies will go work for the Army Corps, which
Okay.
offers a bit more stability than the actual construction side. Or you'll be, or it might narrow um, where in the country you would be working. So, like, you might just be working for the Galveston district of the Army Corps of Engineers. So you'd have to travel around within that district, but that's only one part of Texas, or the Jacksonville district. Um, that's kind of, that transition is a little bit difficult because once you go work for the federal government, you can't go work for a federal contractor without a transition period. So we can't, and that's part of the just federal government ethics. We can't go hire an Army Corps inspector and have them work on our projects immediately. Um, so that does take a little bit more thought from people. It
Mhm.
feels a little bit more final, even though you could come back. There would just be a little bit more difficulty um, or some time in between going from working for a federal agency to a federal contractor. So it's 2 things. And then the other thing is just going and starting your own business. We
Mhm.
like see lots of people who find niche needs in our industry who then decide, you know what, I'm going to go make an entire business out of like small time pile driving in um, just one part of Florida. Um,
Yeah.
or, uh, you know, uh, there's one friend I have who basically supplies packing needs. She recognized that federal contracts have small business requirements. If you have to spend certain amounts of money with certain types of small business. So she started a woman-owned small business that supplies packing needs, like saran wrap
Mm.
and stuff. So she found that need and filled it. Um, yeah, so I think we have people move between companies. Like there's Manson, there's Weeks Marine, there's Orion, there's Great Lakes Dredge and Dock, there's Kiewit Construction. There are all these players um, in the industry, but honestly, it is a pretty small industry. So we trade people back and forth, just like lots of industries. But when people really step out of it, it's to design, it's to the regulatory agencies or the government side of things, or to start their own business, because you've worked into this project management and construction management role, and so you've had to work with other parties, you've had to work with the government, you've had to work with permitting, you've had to manage the money, you've had to manage the schedule, you've had a really you know, broad setup. Your projects have essentially been your own little business that you had to manage, so go manage a business.
Yeah, exactly what I was kind of thinking. I mean, they already have that insight and that knowledge of the industry and kind of taking it and being like, okay, what can I do that's a little bit less, time consuming and on site, but can still kind of incorporate what I already know. So
Mm-hmm.
that those three kind of like do make a lot of sense and they do mesh very well together.
Yeah.
Are there any books or resources, programs, or certifications that you would recommend to somebody wanting to get their start in this profession?
There are actually a lot of construction management certificate programs out there. I recently did one with Florida Atlantic University. It was like slightly less than $2,000. It was just eight, see, 8 2-week courses, so 16
Okay.
weeks, all remote. So that was a great certificate.
Yeah.
There are lots of programs like University of Washington and let's see, a couple in California that I researched, and I think one at FIT that I researched, um, that have uh, like ocean engineering programs at the school, but also have these construction management certificate programs that are like $10,000 to $15,000. So
Okay.
you can get this construction management cert at a university that has ties to the industry, um, for far less than like getting another degree. And then
Exactly. Way cheaper.
that kind of certificate, especially the one that I did, I wish I had done it earlier in my career, like maybe 3 years in. I did it 7 years in. Um, but they're bigger ones that are more in that $10,000 range, uh, that really set you up to then go get your general contractor's license, which is very valuable to any company. And you can take that to any construction industry in whatever state you're certified in and be able to use it. It's pretty easy to go to another state and get your license as well. But yeah, those are some good. There are some really good programs out there, um, that can get you going, and they're remote, um, and not too much money, and can get you in the door.
Yeah, easily accessible also. That's
Mm-hmm.
great. That's really good to know. So just to kind of wrap up our interview with our last question, we want to know if you were to have the chance to look back at your younger self when you were at the start of your career, what would you tell her?
um, it's just as fun as you think it's gonna be. Because I found what I loved. My three passions are Jesus, people, ocean, and so I've gotten to wrap those up. Um, but also, just take don't take everything too seriously. One of our VPs, um, frequently says, "Don't sweat the small things, and they're all small things," and just that idea that we can figure it out. We've figured it out before. You're not alone. I think that's, a big part of what I would communicate to younger Hannah is you don't have to know this stuff on your own when you're a year in. It's okay. Just
Yeah.
ask around, and you'll be able to figure it out. Um, so I think that's what I would go back to is, you're not alone. It's gonna be okay. Go ask the questions. You'll figure it out. I and that would be a message for the kind of person I am. And you know, some people need to be a little bit more stressed out. Need to take things a little more seriously. I think I
Uh-huh.
took myself too seriously, and that was detrimental. But yeah, um,
Yeah,
gonna
but you
be
learned from it.
okay.
Yeah, you learned from it and look where you are now. So
Yeah,
it was worth it.
yeah.
Well, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the Job Dictionary today. And, just your passion and your knowledge for your work is so evident. I was able to learn so much just from our discussion. So we really enjoyed you coming on. Thank you for taking the time out of your, crazy busy schedule and out of the ocean to go ahead and talk to us. So we really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Alexia.
Of course. Have a great day, Hannah. We'll be seeing you.
You just got one episode closer to learning about the world of jobs out there. To explore the rest of our career categories and find your best fit, go to jobdictionary.com to sign up for the beta users waitlist. Then subscribe here to find the next episodes coming out this week. And as always, drop us a comment, review, or message to let us know how we could better attune our episodes to your specific needs. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Threads, Pinterest, and wherever else you're on socials to go get our short, snappy preview reels that expose you to new job options every day. Because here at Job Dictionary, we believe your big aha moment can be just one scroll away. Go check it out and get out there. Cheers!